A battle to the death. Classic albums clash until there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, relate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them is one. Then it's to the semis and the final for the vinyl cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin. Record shot. To the hip, dip, the hop, you don't stop.
Hello and welcome to Hip Hop World Cup, the podcast that pits golden age hip hop albums against each other in a contest to find the ultimate champion. I'm your host, Danny Phillips, and joining me as ever are Steve Hitchcock. How you doing, Steve?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Hi, everybody.
And James Larry Luscombe. How are you, Larry?
Yeah, good, mate. Thanks.
So, yeah, this is the final episode of the series and part 2 of our special 1994 Hip Hop World Cup. So to celebrate, we're in the corporate box at the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena, California, which was the venue of the 1994 Football World Cup final. And to celebrate, we've invited around 50 fans of the podcast for a buffet lunch, which they're enjoying, as you can hear. We've got a couple of the perverted monks going around from table to table doing some close-up magic for our guests. And later on, Malachi the Nutcracker will be given an after-dinner speech about his charity work for the Gangstar Foundation. So that'll be a real treat. We were also joined in the box in this episode by a panel of special guests from earlier in the series. Just to give their thoughts as we go along, we have John Barnes with us. How are you doing, John?
Hi, how are you doing?
We've got Peter Schmeichel in the box. Hi, Peter.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone.
Paul Gazagascoigne's joining us again. How are you doing, Paul?
No, I'm good. I'm glad that's over with.
We've got Euro 96 England boss Terry Venables with us. Hi Terry.
How you doing, all right?
Sepp Blatter's joining us once again. Hi, Sepp.
Hello.
And finally, we've got Adrian Childs with us. Hi, Adrian.
Hello. You well?
So, chaps, quite the party atmosphere in here. Our guests are obviously milling around enjoying the canapes and the buffet lunch. How are you feeling about this? It's a big World Cup. We've been looking forward to doing this one for quite a while. What are your emotions, Steve?
Well, yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing this episode, but I'm going to kind of say I'm just this very small bit of me is quite disappointed. It's like looking forward to Christmas, wanting all your kind of best presents, and then you find out your mum's bought you the wrong CD, the one that your brother was wanting, and I've got some pants and some Scale Electrics that I'm only going to play with for a couple of days, and for me this is like the golden year of the golden age, and I'm just a bit kind of like disappointed. All of my favorite albums haven't made this kind of grand final, but that's why we do it in this World Cup format. So even though some of my best albums I think have been left out, there's still some fantastic ties tonight. So I am excited, just a tiny bit disappointed.
Way to piss on the bonfire, Steve. Larry, what are your thoughts on this one? I mean, you're a big fan of 1994 as a year in hip hop.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are your feelings?
Yeah, there are 6 really big ones in here for me. But the problem kind of with that, as it so often is that it can be very difficult to sort of gather your thoughts on such seminal albums, really. Like you've got Illmatic in here this year, for example. What can you say about that?
Absolutely, that hasn't been said already. Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be a difficult one, but hopefully we can tease out some new insights into them. So just to recap, because 1994 was such a monumental year for hip hop with so many great albums released, FIFA decided to expand it to 16 albums spread across 2 episodes. In the last episode, we discussed the first round matches, but in this episode, we're now going to discuss the 8 albums that made it through to the quarterfinals. And just to recap those, they are Casual's Fear Itself, Resurrection by Common Sense, Method Man's Tikal, Murder Was the Case soundtrack, Illmatic by Nas, Paris's Gorilla Funk, The Beatnuts, and Ready to Die by the Notorious B.I.G. So those are the 8 winners from the last episode, and they're going to be competing against each other in this episode. Now, as for the rules, if for any reason you don't know how this podcast works, here's a quick recap for you.
Ladies and gentlemen,
It's the damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit. Damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit.
there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it.
It's the damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit.
Only the strong survive.
So here are the rules. Using a scientific process of shortlists and horse trading, Danny, James and Steve agree on a list of 8 albums from the chosen year, which will compete for the Hip Hop World Cup. In each round, our pundits draw the albums from a hat to decide who plays who, then discuss each match and vote for the album they want to win. Albums with the most votes progress through the rounds to the final, where the lads vote again to decide which album is the undisputed Hip Hop World Cup champion. Let the games begin.
So, Larry, Tru-Skore, have you got it back up and running again? Is it all working? Is it all firing?
Really good news on the Tru-Skore front, actually. If you recall, last time I was waiting for the machine to be recalibrated, well, rebuilt from the ground on up, actually.
Absolutely.
I was using, as a stand-in, a really kind of ultra high-end digital computer system, which had been designed exactly for the task of, assessing hip-hop albums. However, it's a really, really big one this week. So we were always going to need something a bit more powerful, even sort of than the RM Nimbus machine, which, as you know, could process a song an hour. I've been in touch with the people at Tru-Skore, their top engineers. What they've come up with, and I can't believe it, it fits 50 years of data from the Tru-Skore system, distills it literally into the palm of your hand. It's an app that they've developed.
An app.
As I say,
Wow.
An app. So it leverages modern smartphone technology with all the kind of, trappings that come with that into, it combines that with the Tru-Skore scoring matrix. And it's been the preserve of professionals and, experts up until now. It can now be utilized by the average hip hop fan. So yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Hip hop
Can I get that
evaluation.
placement?
Hip hop evaluation for the masses at last.
Exactly. And they've asked me to say, actually, they're making this app freely available.
Brilliant.
Freely available to download for just $19.99, plus a small recurring monthly subscription of $9.99. It's only available on the BlackBerry platform at the moment. We're just waiting for, they're just waiting, for Apple and Google to reinstate our permission after there was some kind of small issues that they were having. But I've been using it this week. It's incredible, and I'm sure that fans of the podcast will be rushing to the BlackBerry app site to download this as soon as the episodes are
They'll be
finished.
typing that into Ask Jeeves as we speak.
They really will be. There is one small disclaimer they've asked me to say, which is that neither Tru-Skore nor its parent company JL Industries can be held liable for the accessing of camera phones, which has been occasionally reported in the beta testing stage. So just something to be aware of legally.
That's massively exciting. Steve, that sounds like one that you're definitely going to be downloading onto your phone.
Definitely. Well, that's a giant leap forward for Tru-Skore.
Yeah, they've said
Absolutely.
actually that they've given us a discount code. It's hip hop 21 is the code, and that's available for all 18 to 30-year-old female listeners of the show. So there's only 100 download codes.
So
Get
get on that,
get it
ladies.
quickly.
Ladies, get on that as soon as possible.
Feminism.
Thanks for that, Larry. Sounds really exciting. Can't wait to see how it works with some of these albums. Just a quick word about our special guest coming up at the end of the show. Before I say who it is, Steve, I need to ask you, who won the Football World Cup in 1994?
Good question. Was it Italy?
No,
Oh,
Brazil.
Brazil. And you will not believe who I have lined up to share his thoughts on our winning album after the final. It's none other than Brazil World Cup legend Edson Arantes de Nascimento, better known as Pele. You do not want to miss that. Please stay tuned. He's joining us via satellite phone from his home in Brazil at the end of the show. So please do not miss that. So that's something to look forward to.
World Cup, round one. World Cup, round one. World Cup, round one. World Cup.
Welcome back. We're doing the 1994 Hip Hop World Cup, and we've reached the quarterfinals stage. So the quarterfinal matches were drawn earlier today, and the first match out of the hat was Common Sense's Resurrection versus the Murder Was the Case soundtrack. Quite a strange pairing. Steve, which one did you vote for out of those two?
I went for Resurrection, which I think might have surprised both of you. So kind of just to fill the listeners in, Resurrection is an album I've always, gone in opposition with you two, because I think this is an album you both love, and I kind of maybe, tried to like dampen your enthusiasm for it. But I've gone for it because actually it's a really good album. I've just never kind of thought of it as highly as you do.
Yeah. And what about you, Larry? What did you go for?
I think Steve's given the game away there a bit. I did go for Resurrection. It's absolute top tier album for me.
So I did as well, which means it was a 3-0 win for Resurrection. A real drubbing there for the Murder Was the Case soundtrack. But as you say, Larry, this was an album that we absolutely love, and we will talk more about it in the semi-finals when we get to it. But as for our losing album, the Murder Was the Case soundtrack, it kind of came through in that first round. I think it was a fairly narrow victory for it. It's been a bit of a weird one. There were even some rumblings that maybe a soundtrack shouldn't have been included, but
it shouldn't have been in the final.
Well.
I think we've probably all got quite a good kind of sentimental attachment to it as well, wasn't it? Because of the time it was released in our lives, but also there's loads of tracks in it that just like regurgitated, aren't they, from like other albums?
Yeah, but it's like, I think it's a really, really good album. I think it's a really good sort of snapshot of the G-Funk sound and Daz's production from around that time. I think it's an absolutely proper showcase for his production. I think some of his best work is on this album. There's some absolute amazing stuff on here. For that, it's one of my most played hip hop CDs today. It's like there's so many other CDs I just can't bring myself to listen to, but I'd still listen to this one because it's such a great listen. I can put it on in the car. It's just that sort of G-Funk sound is just really palatable.
Yeah, the hip hop songs that are on there are good, but then there's some R&B stuff that is just not palatable for me, and I think that also kind of spoils it as now. But then again, it's a soundtrack, isn't it? It's not a proper kind of hip-hop.
It's a bit of a mixed bag, a bit of a hodgepodge. But there is for me a really let's start from the beginning. It's got the Murder Was a Case remix on it, which I think is appalling.
It's brilliant.
And then we go into Natural Born Killers, which is another track I absolutely hate. I bore that track.
This has always really confused me. Is it the content?
It's the content. It's the thin beat that he's come up with, the silly sounds, the screechy sounds. It was everything I didn't think a sort of a collaboration between Dre and Cube should be. It just didn't speak to me in that way. It wasn't what I was waiting for. It wasn't what I was hoping for when I heard them team up like that. Again,
I love that track. That's my favorite track on the album.
Is it?
I think the synths or whatever the kind of those crazy sounds on there it's great, and the rapping's really hard on there. Dr. Dre always produces tracks that have good quality, and that's another one.
It's a decent enough, well-produced track. It's just the actual mood of it, the tone of it, just doesn't speak to me. I prefer the sort of smoother stuff. But maybe
we need to go back to Murder Was the Case as well, because actually I think the remix is better than the original. And maybe that again is just the kind of personal preference. I don't know what Larry thinks, but
yeah, I'm the opposite. I think it just the original was brilliant, and this one just strips it of any kind of menace or tension that was kind of there in the original. I really don't see the point of it at all. I think it's there in order to kind of give you a reason to buy it, maybe like to have a Snoop Dogg track on there. And it's just a bit pointless, really.
And I don't like the snare on it, that sort of delay snare on it that kind of echoes. I don't like that. I just think it's a waste of time. And then you get through those first two tracks, and then you get to What Would You Do? And for me, classic. From that point, there was a clear run right the way through, almost to Dollars and Cents by DJ Quick. You've got things like What Would You Do, 21 Jump Street, One More Day, I can keep Harvest for the World on. I don't mind that because I quite like the Isley Brothers and I like that song. And it's also a Dre production, so kind of I leave it on for that. But then you got Who Got Some Gangster Shit, Come When I Call, which is a DJ Quick production, which is, say what you like about R&B and that sort of stuff. It's a really good, well-produced track that uses a Michael Henderson sample that I love. And then you go, You Better Recognize, Come Up to My Room, the Jodeci track, and then you skip Woman to Woman and you come on to Dollars and Cents. I just think that's a really nice run of tracks that kind of encapsulate the Death Row Daz sound from that time. I put it on, I listen to it in the car, I just absolutely love it. It's one of those that gives me the chills as I'm driving along. But it's come up against Common Sense, which it was pretty much a foregone conclusion if ever there was one.
I think I'd echo what Steve said. I've got no time at all for any of the kind of R&B kind of moments on this album at all. Just not my type of thing at all. I think like Harvest for the World kind of sounds like a 4-minute intro. It sort of never really gets going.
That is the song of
Isley
Brothers. It's like an intro to Harvest for the World on the Isley Brothers album, which they've made that rather than the actual song.
Right, okay.
Which is weird.
So I really don't like all of those, and like Horny and Woman to Woman, and don't like Come When I Call, any of that. But those tracks you've identified as being classics are classics. Like those, What Would You Do, 21 Jump Street, and One More Day, really kind of stand out as incredible tracks, and just like the peak of Daz's production, basically.
Can we just dwell on One More Day for a minute? Because
please,
for me, I think that's the MVP on this album. That track is just brilliant, fantastic song, great production, very, very musical, and it just showcases. It gives like Nate Dogg a chance to shine for a bit longer than just. Is
this his first solo? Up until this point,
this was his. I think this was his first track, solo track. That he done.
I think to have like a Nate Dogg solo album produced by Daz to that standard at this point in time, like would have been one of my kind of dream kind of things to listen to. Yeah,
absolutely. Did he come out with G-Funk Classics or something, wasn't it?
G-Funk Classics came out later. I remember it was always available on import for about like 30 quid or something. And just never, I never personally bought it kind of because it didn't surface until after I kind of really stopped caring about this type of stuff. Really. So I don't know what it's like. I don't know if either of you have got it at all.
I haven't got it. No, I don't know what it's like. But it needed to sort of come out probably around this time.
Really and 21 Jump Street I also absolutely love. I think it's probably my favourite track on this album, actually.
Yeah, I absolutely adore that track. So smooth.
It's just a perfect kind of distillation of that classic Death Row sound.
Yeah, I think. Absolutely.
Like the bass line's incredible. The way it just sort of snakes around is lovely.
Yeah, it's
lovely.
I
even like the sort of cool, like the easy dick bit at the end with the people calling. I quite like that. And I think, and also like You Better Recognize, I remember that being kind of the standout for me at the time. Really love that track. And as I kind of mentioned to you both via message earlier, I didn't realize that the Sam Snead album from this era like is available on YouTube, and it's absolutely brilliant. I don't know if either of you have heard it at all.
I've heard some of the tracks like Blueberries and things like that. And they're great. But I will give it a proper listen.
Yeah, basically, like those tracks that we know were released on the eventual album, but all of the other tracks were replaced with kind of contemporary tracks at the time when it was released. But the actual original one is all available, and they are all to that quality. Like it's like a genuinely brilliant Death Row album. It's like absolute tragedy that it didn't come out.
Yeah. Oh, right. Definitely checking that one out. Just one final word for me on this one. I think the most slept on track on this album is Who Got Some Gangster Shit.
Yeah.
Which it was one of my personal favourites of the the hip hop ones. It's I just absolutely love that. I listen to that to start to finish. I love the production. I love the synth lines.
Yeah.
The beat, everything about it. Love that one.
I think is it produced by Superfly?
Yeah, pre-Superfly Brooks.
Yeah, which like to me, it just kind of brings up that whole issue of who does what on Death Row again. Because if I didn't know that, I would say that was a Daz beat.
Yeah, but maybe they'll just learn.
I think it. Yeah. I reckon pretty much everything on Death Row was a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
And who actually got the production credit was a bit of a lottery.
Yeah.
I think this just kind of proves that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So that was a 3-0 win for Resurrection by Common Sense, which we'll talk about later on.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
World Cup.
In your sound. Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
World Cup.
In your sound.
World Cup.
Moving on to the second match in the quarterfinals, which was Gorilla Funk by Paris versus Ready to Die by Notorious B.I.G. Now that is a mismatch if ever I saw one. Two very, very different albums.
Yeah.
And so, Steve, you voted for Ready to Die, didn't you? You were the dissenting voice on that one.
I voted for Ready to Die, so I think I'm just going to leave this to you two to explain yourselves.
Yeah, well, yeah, Larry and I both voted for Gorilla Funk, giving it a 2-1 victory over Ready to Die. And I know there are going to be hip-hop fans across the world who listen to this podcast who just cannot
They'll be turning
that.
off, won't they?
They'll be turning off now. They'll be turning off
What
their
are you
pod
thinking? Yeah.
players.
It is a mad decision.
It's a mad decision.
On paper, it's mental.
It's mental, and Biggie himself will be rolling in his grave at this. But I think we have some explaining to do, Larry. So do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I love Ready to Die, so I'm happy to I will talk about that in the most glowing terms, and we'll get on to Gorilla Funk later. But yeah, it really, of all of the decisions we've had to make in this whole kind of run, I think this is probably the toughest for me, because Ready to Die is one of my favorite albums ever. I think it comes quite close to being perfect.
Okay.
James Duscombe, how could you?
Why have you voted for Gorilla Funk then?
Well, I think we'll talk about that when we get to it. I think it probably comes down to more of a personal kind of attachment to it. To be honest, I ran this through the Tru-Skore app. Really kind of put it through its paces for its kind of first test, and yeah, Gorilla Funk just came out on top. It's got more high scoring tracks. Ready to Die is just a little bit too long. If they had trimmed a bit of the fat from it, it would be
true.
It would be perfect. Like there are just, I think, you've got things like One More Chance, Respect, Friend of Mine that just aren't good, that they're fine, but they're not good enough to be up there with Things Done Change, Gimme the Loot, Machine Gun Funk, all of those kind of classic tracks. He's got access to any producer he wants, any beat he wants. Like it should have been better.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think about this album as well, is that it's not as good as everyone thinks it is. And actually, I think you have to wait, in my opinion, about 6 tracks before you get to the first classic track, which I think is like Ready to Die. Then it's another 4 tracks
really?
before you get to do. Yeah, I think the start of the album is not strong, and then it's only till you get towards the end. Apart from Respect, the last third of the album, I think, is absolutely incredible.
Right.
And it's an album I think I always want to just get to that last third and listen to the last third, more than anything.
Okay. That surprises me. I think it starts really strong, remains generally quite strong, apart from a few kind of outliers. I think Things Done Change is one of my all-time favorite tracks. It's just kind of epic, cinematic sounding song, I think.
Yeah, I have to say I agree that the first sort of 5 tracks are the best part of
even
this album
even like the intro is good, and it's about 3 minutes long.
3 minutes. That's mental.
But it's worth listening to. It's really good.
Yeah,
it is intro you don't want to skip. Definitely, yeah.
No, hip hop timeline, isn't it?
It's probably one of the best kind of skits in all of hip hop. I think really kind of tells you who he is. Really sets out the stall. But yeah, I think that's just to talk about Biggie, because he is such a huge part of hip hop. I think the thing about him mainly is the voice, and I think for my money, it's probably the best voice in all of hip hop. I think
He does sound good. I think that his flow is never off though. He's so consistently good.
I think I love the beats on this, but I think it would be a classic album if it were just a cappella. I think he's that engaging that I could just listen to him completely straight. He's got everything really. He's just, really he's got that voice. It's not just the voice, it's the delivery. It's so, I don't know, it just slaps you around the face, doesn't it? It just grabs you.
He's got some of the best punchlines, isn't he? He's
got some of the best punchlines. Really, and actually, what I kind of noticed going through this today, he's got such a way of writing a brilliant opening line. Yeah. And I won't go through them, but if you just kind of look through the song list and think about the first line for each of them, there are so many incredible ones on there, like Juicy, it was all a dream. Just every single first line just makes you want to listen to the rest of the song. It kind of just hooks you in from the start. Just really vivid descriptions of kind of life in Brooklyn, and it's also it's done in a really kind of very straightforward, unfussy way. The things he's talking about, the street life and drug dealing, all that kind of stuff. If you compare it to someone like Raekwon, to give the kind of biggest example, I think, who I understand raps about selling crack and stuff like that, but he does it using such impenetrable slang and metaphors that I just have to take your word for it that that's what it's about. I don't really understand what he's saying. Whereas Biggie, it's nothing. It's not clever kind of stuff. He just chooses his words very carefully. It's very simple, and just has a way of just selling it to you so well.
I think that's why he's quite graphic. I think without being complicated, and he's just that. Everyone says he's a great storyteller, and he is. It's just, he's such a unique rhymer. He is one of the greatest rappers ever. No question.
Absolutely. I think it's just some there are just tracks like Suicidal Thoughts that I don't know who else was was doing that kind of stuff. But that track is just such a perfect fusion of music and rapping. Yeah. That Lord Finesse, I think it is beat, is just so dark. And the subject matter is just that bit at the end where his body drops on the floor, just genuinely gets me every time. It's horrible.
Yeah. That's why I like the end. I think Unbelievable was great at the end, and then it's Suicidal Thoughts and Who Shot You, and it's it's a window into his life, and it's his bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. It's scary, really.
For me, it's just those few tracks. But when you think of Things Done Change, Warning, Juicy, Everyday Struggle, like Me and My Bitch, all really kind of serious, kind of hardcore songs, and then you've just got to have things like One More Chance on there. It also really bugs, Juicy. I love that track, but the fact you've got, I think it's Mace, in the background, just saying it's all good, every 2 seconds. Just think little things like that, just really annoying.
Yeah. Well, Danny, you've got some explaining to do as well, though.
Well, I've made no bones about the fact that I've never been on board with this album. I don't like it. I didn't listen to it back in the day, really. I do agree that he's an incredible MC. He's the voice. He's the biggest, one of the best MCs that ever lived, and I hear that and I like it, and I love his rapping style, but it's got to be married with beats that I'm into, and I just never loved the beats on this album. You know me, I'm more of a beats man.
Are they a bit too heavy for you?
Not heavy. I don't know what it is. It's just they're a bit too. There's some stuff on here I love. Everyday Struggle is just
it's a bit more jazz, bit more jazzy.
I just and they they put the 5 stair steps break underneath it as well, and it's that. That's one of my favorites. I love that, and the hook's brilliant. And there's some good stuff on it, but I don't know, it's just something about it. I don't know whether it was that whole bad boy, puffy, kind of clean, crisp aesthetic they had in the music, but it just didn't quite, it never grabbed me like in the way it should, and it seems to grab everybody else. But I will admit, the first 5 tracks are, I think, some of the best stuff on here. I am a big fan of Easy Mo B as well, who did a lot of the beats on this album. And you can hear his style in there and his big snares and all that sort of stuff.
He's someone I never really dug into apart from this. I don't know. I really should.
He's behind so many of my favourite hip hop moments, Flavor in Your Ear and things like that.
Yeah.
But don't you think like the rapping is like classic rapping, but the production, there's nothing on there you think, oh yeah, that's standout classic production?
Not really. I have to. It bores me. The songs just bore me as I'm listening to them. I just don't. They don't grab me. And maybe these are my issues. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
I think everyone. I've got similar albums that I feel that way about. I just struggle to see how you feel that about these songs. Like, to me, they're really engaging, and just sort of bafflement, really. It kind of what it is that you don't sort of get about it.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's ingrained in me at the time of purchase. I buy it, I listen to it, and if I'm not feeling it, then that kind of taints my view on, as I go forward. I've revisited it. I can't get into it.
So,
I can't explain it. I genuinely cannot explain it.
So Danny, when I'm not disappointed that Gorilla Funk is in the semi-final, because I love that album as well. But when you listen to Ready to Die, when I listen to Ready to Die, I get a feeling that I'm listening to like greatness, and
I agree with that.
As an MC,
you admit that he's a great MC, and I don't get you just don't get the same feeling when you listen to Paris's album.
No, he's not by no means. He's not a great lyricist, Paris. But what I'm looking for when I put a hip hop album on is to be entertained, for it to excite me. And I listen to Gorilla Funk, and it's a really exciting album. It makes me smile.
Great
I listen
album.
to it.
Definitely a great album.
And it makes the blood flow through my veins. And I put Ready to Die on. It leaves me cold, and I just can't explain it. It's just one of those things. I never liked it, even though I recognise, Rakim, Notorious B.I.G. is one of the greatest MCs of all time.
Yeah.
But I cannot connect with it. There's just this thing, that's stopping me loving this album as much as I should. I'll listen to it, I'll nod along, and I'll put it on, and I'll think, oh, that was a good line, or, that's a clever idea, or I love that sample, but I can't fall in love with it like everybody else does. And I know I'm going to get, mail now, emails.
Yeah, I get it. There's, there are lots of albums that I feel that way about, and I feel almost like a shame that I don't. Like, there must be something wrong with me that I don't like, Rakim so much, or whatever it is. But I get it.
Hip hop shame, it's a real thing. So for that reason, because me and you, Larry, we got this attachment to Gorilla Funk. It's dumped Biggie Smalls out of the tournament.
I did find myself earlier thinking, have I made a grievous error here?
Right.
I'm not convinced that I haven't. I'm going to stick. Once you've made your vote, you voted for it. But the many sleepless nights over this one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you say that. I listened to Gorilla Funk today, and it confirmed that I made the absolute right decision because it is an absolute masterpiece. Anyway, Biggie Smalls dumped out of the competition in one of the greatest shocks in Hip Hop World Cup history. Goodbye, Biggie.
World Cup. World Cup.
We're moving on now to the third match in the quarterfinals, the third quarterfinal between Method Man and Casual, an East versus West affair. We have Method Man's Tikal versus Casual's Fear Itself. Now, in this one, we had a 2-1 win for Method Man. Steve, you went for Method Man. Larry, what did you go for?
I went for Method Man.
Absolutely. So there's 2 for Method Man, and Fear Itself got the sole vote for me again, dissenting voice. So
this one I can understand a bit more. I can understand why a person wouldn't like Tikal. I know that it just really isn't your bag musically.
Yeah,
no, it's absolutely a very hard album to listen to.
Yeah, definitely. But what are your thoughts, Steve, on Fear Itself?
Well, I slept on this album. Put my hands up and say that this is an album I wasn't so familiar with, and it's an album I love now. I love the Hieroglyphics production, some of your favourite producers on there, and he's a great rapper, isn't he? I like his cadence. I like his what he raps about, and there's there's some really great classic tracks on here. I didn't mean to. Love the way he raps on that.
Yeah. That's quite an interesting track actually, because it's got like a backwards sample in it, doesn't it? Kind of the beat kind of sounds like it's going backwards.
Yeah.
I love. Yeah, really good, really innovative. Sorry, go on.
It's very, very, very clever track. And then we got it like that. Love that track. This is how he rips shit. Brilliant. And Chained Minds. I don't know if you two like that one, but it's kind of like feels like there's like a slight change in the production style when it gets that track. It's kind of a bit more sparse, and I really like that. So no, I think it's a really great long player. There's a few weaker tracks that let it down when it gets to kind of like this point in the tournament. But yeah, great production, good rapping, but just not great enough to get any further. And I think, you know, Larry and I probably talk in detail about our love for Takao in the next round, but it was not going to, for me, it was going to come close to beating Method Man.
No. I mean, Casual got my vote in this one just because, well, you know, we'll talk about Takao later on, but for me, you know, I absolutely love this Casual album. He's very much like Common, you know, another rapper who had an album out in '94 that we'll talk about. He's got one of these who's got great wordplay, very clever similes, metaphors, and one of those kind of slightly more manic, wordy, verbose styles. He just packs a lot of words in. He's quite manic at times, quite animated. But you know, for me, obviously, I love the beats, so the production I find is amazing. You know, I think this might be the best Hieroglyphics album. Some of the best beats on it for me anyway. I just think the production's incredible, jazzy, really unusual, kind of weird samples that you wouldn't find you know, many other places. They really dig in the crates, the Hieroglyphics crew. And I love it. There's so many good tracks on it. I do think it's probably a little bit long. I think some of it could have been trimmed down, like 16 tracks. Perhaps it kind of drags on when you've got that in that same style all the way through. But you know, there's loads of great standout moments. For me, my favourite track was always "Who's It On," with that Nathan Davis sample on there. It's really nice, jazzy saxophones, all that sort of stuff. And it's also like a posse cut. They all come in and do a verse on that. But like you say, Steve, you know, what was it? That's How It Is great. You Flunked is a great intro. That double bass sample.
Really good.
There's so many great things on here, and it kind of samples sort of blaxploitation soundtracks and sort of obscure jazz artists. I just think it's really innovative, very unusual, and I think Casual's a really engaging rapper. Sometimes the pitch of his voice, the tone of his voice can be a bit grating. He's a bit kind of not nasal, but he just kind of but otherwise, just a really, really solid album. I used to listen to this quite a lot back in the day, so that's why it got my vote. Larry, what are your thoughts on Fear Itself?
I think it did incredibly well to get to this point, really. I think most people would be surprised to find it in the top 8 albums of 1994.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of love for this album.
Is there? Okay. It's not a bad album by any means, but I personally only heard it I think like a few years ago. And I remember quite liking it at first, but it just never made it into my regular kind of listening. I just think it's very average. It's got no, not that it should matter, but it's got no kind of historical significance like a lot of other kind of albums in this year do. I think the beats are generally quite dull. His voice is really interesting at first, but I just can't listen to it over the course of a whole album. Yeah,
it does great. It does great slightly.
It's really unique. I think for me, the best thing he ever did was his verse on What's the Real by Curious. And listening to that today, it just reminded me that it's my fault that the Curious album isn't in this competition. And it should be. And I didn't advocate for it strongly enough. So I'm sorry.
Shame, but that's you know, the Hip Hop World Cup is a cruel mistress, and sometimes we don't get the competitors that we should.
This is it. So yeah, I just don't really have. It all sort of the whole album sort of blends into one for me. Really, I can't really give any comments about individual tracks because I couldn't really listen to it for that long.
Yeah, well, no, that's fair enough. I mean, and for that reason, you're probably pretty happy to see it sort of dumped out at the quarterfinal stage. I will just one final thing on it that I always kind of made me love it is the intro. his rap on the intro. He claims it's off the top of the dome, but I don't believe him. It sounds very written.
I don't believe
I
any
love that.
freestylers.
No, and it's one of those rhymes I can recite. I won't do it now. I'll spare you. But I love it so much that I kind of memorized it, and I just it's one of those unusual intros that is kind of like stuck with me. Anyway, so that's So that's match 3, quarterfinal 3. That sees Tikal going through 2-1 against Fear Itself by Casual.
World Cup. World Cup.
And in the final match in this round, we have Illmatic by Nas, the legendary 5 mic album, up against the Beatnuts debut album, which some people call Street Level. I don't, but
No, it's not street level.
no, it's called
The streaming
Beatnuts.
services, the streaming platforms call it street level.
Do they?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's
Not
it's
saying
been-
they're right, but
No, it's been embraced. That's been embraced as its name in the intervening years, but it originally was not called Street Level. Anyway, we're nitpicking here. So in this game, we saw Illmatic win 2-1 with, once again, myself being the dissenting voice voting for the Beatnuts,
what is
which I
wrong
know
with you this evening? What's
you
going
will,
on?
you're gonna find very strange and very unusual. I can't put into words how much I love the Beatnuts album. Like I'm one of its biggest advocates. I listen to it all the time. Today, I put it on all the time. I love the Beatnuts as a production outfit. I just find their style of hip hop just so engaging.
The production is brilliant, but what about the rapping?
Yeah, but that's all the other thing. I love their rapping as well. I love their kind of the tag team style, you know, where one comes in and there's a crew of them, and they'll do bits of a verse, and they'll come in and they make it
so
really
basic.
exciting. They make it really exciting. It's not basic though. But it's entertainment.
Their rapping is the most basic rhyming, and the theme's the same on every track.
Then why can I recite most of the album, but I couldn't tell you any of Illmatic? Why does that make it worse? Like
because the Beatnuts is easy to remember. Their vocabulary is probably a few.
No, but
hundred words.
I'm more
Nas is
compelled.
one of the most poetical, vocabulary rich albums that you'll come across. So it's just a lot of the same on Beatnuts.
But I'm more compelled to want to remember them. That's the problem. Is that I don't want to learn Nas's right. I don't want to remember them. I listen to Illmatic. Like I find it boring. A lot of his verses.
You like the hedonism, don't you?
I like the people who really want to entertain you, and they want to give you something that makes you go and get the blood pulsing around your veins.
the Robbie Williams of
the
hip-hop.
Robbie Williams, the technical rappers like Nas and Biggie. Yeah, they're brilliant. They're awesome. But if they don't make the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end as I'm driving along in my car, then it's not. I won't listen to it as much as I do the albums that do.
Yeah, but you can listen to just one Beatnuts track over and over again, the same one. It's the same topic. It's hedonistic. It's misogynistic. It's I'm not like a lot of hip hop's like that, but it's just so samey.
But it's done so well. It's like the samples they choose, the way they stitch it together, the beats. It makes you nod your head. The way the interplay, the way they rap. And I just I can't pick out many bad tracks on the album. It's one of those I can listen to all the way through. And for me, the Beatnuts I'm a massive fan of the Beatnuts, and I listen to this a hell of a lot more than I did Illmatic back in the day.
You've got a lot more willpower than I have to listen to this album over and over again, because I get tired. I don't know about you, Larry. I get tired listening to it. I don't think I can listen to it all the way through because it just is so, I don't know, samey.
Well, you obviously have no taste in hip hop. You don't know what you're listening to
because I know you love this album, and
I love it. And don't get me wrong, I know that Illmatic is a masterpiece, and I know that this is mental. that I'm not saying for a moment that that Beatnuts is a better album than Illmatic. Don't get it twisted.
No,
I'm just speaking from my heart, and I'm telling you what album I enjoy listening to more. And as this is a favourite, not best podcast, I have to go with my heart.
I think this is like the Gorilla Funk Ready to Die thing, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but I take on board the criticism of this album. Right? It's not poetry. It's they're talking about you know, getting drunk and shagging and all that sort of stuff and smoking drugs. But it just adds up to a really entertaining package for me, and I've just always adored this. And I like being the person who likes this album.
It's got some brilliant
being its
tracks.
champion.
Superbad is brilliant, isn't it? That's an absolute hip hop classic. That's the best track that kind of suits their flow and their style.
See, that's my least favourite track on the album you've picked out there.
Oh,
Which is weird. But yeah, no. So
which one's your favourite?
Well, it was always Props Over Here for ages, because that was the one I was introduced to them through, and like the video used to be on MTV Raps, and I used to love that track. I love the sample and the beat and everything. And it's the one they hate. They hate that track because it was their big hit. Yeah, it was their commercial smash.
It's like their Radiohead Creep kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
I think if you were a DJ in a club, in a hip hop club, and you had just cleared the floor because you'd put on something really terrible, if you wanted to get everybody in the room back on that floor, you put Props Over Here on.
Yeah, exactly. Get them going. And interestingly, You Get Props is like.
That's weird, isn't it?
It's weird. It was a remix they did of Props Over Here that they prefer. That's their version of Props Over Here that they prefer. But Props Over Here kind of blew up and everything. I remember I listened to another podcast interview with them. It's really interesting. But anyway, that's my reason for why I voted for it over Illmatic. Don't at me. But there you have it. So, Larry, have you given your thoughts on the Beatnuts? Are you just
I think I always assumed that I really liked the album without really kind of thinking about it too much. But yeah, it's got some incredible tracks. You know, one of them we've just spoken about. Let Off a Couple I love. I could listen to that loop all day long.
The Love and Happiness loop, Monty Alexander.
Yes. I looked that up earlier. It's just absolutely fantastic. So simple, as all the best ones are, really. But I think my thoughts on it very much echo Steve's. I think overall it's far too similar sounding to hold my interest. It's weird. It's one of those ones. It's a bit like sort of the main ingredient that we talked about last time. It's got all of the kind of right things that I like in an album that I should love. It's got the samples that really appeal to me. The drums on this are especially like crunchy and raw, but for some reason it just doesn't quite fit together in a way that holds my attention. And I find myself skipping tracks very quickly. I think once the tracks have like revealed themselves to you after a few bars, that's kind of it, really. And I think for me, it's some of it is in the beats just being a bit average, but rap-wise, I just don't think they've got anything interesting to say. I don't think they have memorable voices. They're not technically particularly good.
That's why I like them.
Yeah. Do you know what my kind of takeaway from it is? And Steve will probably appreciate this more than you, Danny. I know that they came later, but to me, Beatnuts are like an inferior People Under the Stairs.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing. You listen to like Question in the Form of an Answer.
Yeah.
It's a similar kind of thing.
That is the most outrageous thing I think you've ever said.
I expect Thez One would rate the Beatnuts as like some of his most influential, some of his kind of biggest points of influence. Like he obviously kind of takes from them, but I just, I stick by it. They don't engage me. Whereas someone like People Under the Stairs, it's a similar thing, but just
they've kind of refined the formula, maybe
more
refined, interesting version of it. I just don't feel this album, I'm afraid.
Well, all right. Well, yeah, we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. But as I said, it's a moot point because Illmatic went through thanks to you two chumps 2-1. So that completes our semi-final lineup. So the 4 albums that have gone through to the semi-finals are Common Sense's Resurrection, Paris's Gorilla Funk, Method Man's Tikal, and Illmatic by Nas. Chaps, is a decent semi-final lineup. I think there's one in there that may be sort of a bit of a surprise, as we've said, but overall this should be an entertaining semi-final lineup. Yeah.
I think there might be. Do you think there'll be some upsets?
Quite possibly. I still can't get my head around. I'm still processing what's gone through, and I'm still processing what we've just talked about here. I need to go and have a lie down before we start the semis. Anyway, so join us after this when we'll be back with the semi-finals of the Hip Hop World Cup 1994.
World Cup.
Semi-final.
World Cup. Semi-final. World Cup. Who's that going to be? World Cup.
Semi-final.
World Cup. World Cup.
So hi, welcome back. We've left the comfort of the corporate box now, and we're pitch side at the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena for the semi-finals of the Hip Hop World Cup 1994. Diana Ross is back out on the pitch, up to her old tricks again. This time she's taking the crossbar challenge, trying to hit the crossbar from the halfway line. She's popped that one into Rose Ed. That's quite a shocking effort there, Diana. Oh, now she's got a shirt over her head now. Oh dear.
She's not so supreme on the football pitch, is she?
Lovely stuff. Not anymore. No. Anyway, let's leave her to it. So we're going to go over to Steve now in our sort of temporary green screen studio that we've had set up here to do the draw. Again, looks like he's floating. And you've got a very, very special guest with you there, Steve, haven't you, to do the draw with you? Who have you got?
Yeah, I've got to be really careful what I say here because I don't actually know how why he's here or how he got here, but it's Suge Knight. And actually, you know, viewers will probably, they might think that he should be in jail at the moment, and he should be. So I honestly don't know how he got here. I didn't invite him. He's just turned up to do the draw.
He's broken out. Well, you need to be careful. Again, you know, he's not above our contracts, so he's not allowed to speak again. Let's just make that clear.
The man I always used to refer to as Marion Suge Knight.
And joining Suge Knight there to help you as well is Brian Barwick from the FA. So let's go, Steve. Let's get the first album out of the hat.
Okay, first one out is Common Sense, Resurrection.
Oh, okay.
We've gone out first against METHOD Man.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
I think we can hit C with a final shaping up, can't we?
I think we can.
You've still got to do the draw. Suge is desperate to pull the other balls out.
He's very contractual.
Right, let's do it now then. Go on. What's the other one, just to make it formal?
So it's G-Funk, Gorilla Funk, by Paris against Nasty Naz, Illmatic.
That's a strange old match, isn't it?
Isn't it just?
Okay, cool. So yeah, the first match was two lyrical heavyweights, Common Sense, as I call him, and Method Man going up against each other. Tikal v Resurrection. Who wants to go first on this one? Steve, come on, let's kick this one off.
Yeah, well, let's start with Resurrection, because I already talked about this album a little bit before, didn't I? Saying actually, you know, I've always kind of said to you two, this album's rubbish and it's not as good as you two make it out. But you know, I'm going to say it, and you can, you know, fall over claps. But I do think this is a great album, and I think it's like it stands on its own in this year in terms of like its kind of style and the way it sounds. It's a little bit kind of ahead of its time. And I know you keep calling him Common Sense, but he was Common Sense here still, wasn't he? I think. And
he was. Yeah.
This was his last album, but he, you know, his voice does annoy me. I think this is what I find difficult. But then his lyricism is just superb. You know, his metaphors and his punchlines are just excellent. In fact, they're as good as Biggie, but he can't deliver them with the same impact because of his voice. You know, I just wish he had a different voice, because I think he'd be considered a much greater rapper than he is. So yeah, I think it's an album with no poor tracks. I just don't have the personal attachment you two do, but I you know, you'd be pleased to hear I really do appreciate, and I do like this album.
Well, that's really encouraging to hear, Steve. And it's funny you say that about his sort of his voice, and because on his first album, Can I Borrow $1, he was a lot more energetic. He was really sort of manic, hyper. You know, I don't know if you ever heard that album, but I think you wouldn't get on board with that one even more.
I don't get on with that album at all.
What he does in this album, he does calm it down. I think even in one of the tracks, he says, you know, calm down, doesn't he? He kind of brings it down a notch. He's a conscious decision to make himself a little bit calmer, a little bit sort of, because he's growing up a bit. But yeah, Larry, I mean, I know you love this album
Yeah.
like I do. So what is it? So distill down what it is you love about this album.
That's tricky, isn't it? I think like going into this whole podcast enterprise, I had it in my mind that this was probably my favorite album ever. Certainly kind of, you know, you and me, Danny, we've got the same top three. It's this, it's Death Certificate, it's the second NWA album. We've never been able to kind of quite rate them in relation to each other. So that's just to give people a kind of idea of the reverence I have for it. But the problem I kind of find myself with it is kind of how to articulate why I love it in a way that does it justice that I kind of think it deserves, really. And I'm glad Steve has brought up the kind of lyricism on this, because I just feel completely inadequate in my ability to kind of describe exactly why he's such an incredible lyricist. And I think actually some of the verses on this album are kind of worthy of proper like academic exploration, like especially in trying to articulate why he's so far ahead of pretty much everyone else up until this point in hip-hop history, I think, which I know is a big thing to say, but I would just urge anyone out there that hasn't listened to this album to, or even anyone that has listened to it, does know it, listen to it while having the lyrics in front of you, because I kind of realised today that although I've been listening to this for, you know, over 20 years, there's so much on there where I don't know what he's actually saying, and to see it written out is absolutely staggering. Just like the title track in itself, I can almost rap it without really knowing the words, if you know what I mean. But actually seeing the words written out, it's just some of the stuff he comes out with is he's so clever.
It's phenomenal.
It's like double meanings.
Meanings.
That's it. The double meanings is definitely one of the key aspects of it. I think I'm with you a little bit, Steve, on his voice. And I always kind of thought that actually he had one of the best voices ever. And I kind of stick by that, but I can also see how it would grate with people a bit, because his voice today on his current albums can bug me a little bit.
Oh, 100%.
You like your nasal rappers as well, don't you? I think
he is sort of nasal in a way, but I don't know. He's kind of it's obviously not enough to put me off. I do like the voice. I almost feel like I've always felt like he exaggerates his own sort of idiosyncrasies. Don't know if that makes any sense. It's like it's like he exaggerates the kind of annoying parts of what his voice and his flow is like. He
is a great lyricist.
It's
one of the most clever, one of the cleverest rappers. Some of the
is there anything like on Resurrection? Is there anything up until this point in time that can touch Resurrection? Like, to me, I remember hearing that and being like, it's what we used to call like next level stuff. It was like it was reinventing rapping to me. Is that an over exaggeration?
I don't think there's anything this intricate, really.
Yeah.
But the other thing with this album is that I used to love that track is so clever as well. Like, he's saying that in 1994.
Yeah.
It's like bonkers.
That is one of the best concept raps of all time. I mean,
but it happened in 94. It's almost like people weren't thinking of doing that stuff till
he was
far
ahead of his time.
I think with that track, it's that track that taught me to properly listen to music.
Yeah.
I remember the penny drop moment. I remember hearing that and love being really engaged with the story, but not quite latching on to what he was talking about. And then when he kind of explains it at the end, you immediately want to rewind and listen to it again, so you can pick it all up again.
Just on that point, it's one of those albums that rewards repeat listens. That's why it stood the test of time, I think, from what you've been saying, Larry.
Yeah,
and certainly from my perspective, is that you can listen to it again. It's so densely packed with lyrics, the musical touches, loads of things, loads of bits.
It's little things like I was guilty in a sense.
Yeah.
I was, like, guilty innocence. Like, that's just it doesn't necessarily make much sense, but in the moment you're just like, fucking hell, that is so, like, how did no one put those two things together like yet?
Yeah, it's so nuanced. There's so much to dig out and listen, and like you say, here for the first time 20, 30 years later, to create something, a piece of art like that still allows you to pick things out of it and meaning and things you never notice is just incredible.
I noticed things today, like through reading it. Like there's a bit in Resurrection where he says, I'll take all the funk out of it. He says, I bathe in beats, rinse in riffs, dry in drums.
Like in a washing machine.
I'm bathed, I'm completely immersed.
And then the immortal opening
in rap music. That's
amazing,
incredible.
is that I stagger in the gathering, possessed by pattern, that be scattering over the global. My vocals be travelling, unraveling the abdomen.
Yeah,
I mean it's on another level.
The rhyme schemes there are. I would love to hear the thoughts of somebody who knows their poetry really well.
And don't get me started. Don't get me started on communism. Because I mean, what he does on that track. It's incredible. I mean, it's a simple concept. It's to see how many words you can get starting in com. Because he's called common sense into it. The way he stitches them together, the way he packs them all in, the way he flows from one to the other. It's breathtaking, and it always has taken my breath away. Watermelon.
Danny, there's such a juxtaposition between this and your love of beatnuts rapping.
I know. This is what. But you bring me on to the other part of this equation, is the beats on this are fantastic. Yeah. No ID knocks it out of the park on this album. Some of the stuff on this album is some of my favorite hip hop beats of all time. It's absolutely incredible. To explain it, it's kind of like nostalgic soul. It's so soulful.
It's jazz, isn't it?
It's jazz, but it's got this kind of real fuzzy 70s soul. Nostalgic quality, but with the beats behind it, they're so crisp and so big, and this is amazing. This is an amazing piece of production.
And like Steve mentioned, it is like musically, it's not boom bap, is it? Quite, it is qualitatively different from it's cut from a similar cloth to I don't know, Premiere. But it doesn't sound anything like it.
All the parts are there. It's
or Q-Tip or any of those kind of guys. Like he is up there on this album with any of those people, I think. And the whole thing. I tell you what, though, I think you were about to mention this, Danny. It's got one of the worst bits of sequencing ever in a hip hop album. To have Resurrection, I Used to Love Her, and then Watermelon.
I see, but I quite like Watermelon.
Really?
Because it kind of... Well, I was going to say...
I think it completely breaks the flow that they've established at
but I've just got used to it being part of the flow of what comes next. And
it's not a terrible track like that. But it's one of the weaker ones, but just to put it there, it's just this is why Illmatic is so tight. It's because it's 10 tight tracks, apart from maybe one. This is just got a few in there, which but that just bring it down just a notch. Like something like Orange Pineapple Juice, it's not bad, but like Watermelon, it just interrupts the flow a little bit. It's a bit unnecessary. It's not quite on the level of the other ones.
When you've got Resurrect, you've got the knockout 1-2 punch of Resurrection, and I Used to Love Her. I'll take your point. Maybe Watermelon was perhaps not the most natural choice to put there, but I've got used to it as being there as part of the sequence of the album. But I think the only other one that I don't really like is Some Shit I Wrote towards the end. But because it's towards the end, I don't mind it.
You don't mind, so
it's there. Even like Maintaining's great. It's just
Maintaining's good. Like Chapter 13.
Chapter 13. I've never heard a hip hop track like Chapter 13 before or after. It's absolutely fantastic. It takes that Archie Whitewater sample and does something with it, and I've just been like obsessed with that track ever since. You've got obviously This Is Me.
That's so funky. I love that.
Yeah, funky. You've also got Nothing to Do, which
one of my favorites.
That's just great.
That sample is, it just makes me, it takes me to another place. It really does. Just how did you find that? I've looked it up. I know what it is, and I've heard it in the context of the original song that he sampled, but for some reason it just
he was digging in different crates, wasn't he?
He was digging in different crates. They're very like that sort of like fuzzy kind of old soul from the 70s. He was digging in those sorts of crates.
This Is Me. I think it's like
Alton McLean and Destiny.
I'd say it's a little detail that I love about this album, and I don't know if you two have kind of it's the bit in Resurrection where it at the end where it fades out and comes back in again.
Yeah,
it's got that brilliant scratch routine, and what's so clever about it is that, and I don't know, maybe this is just obvious from day one, it's being resurrected.
Yeah, that's really clever.
That again, like how clever is that to do that? Like you could, there's no need to do that at the end, but just to take it out and then bring it back, it just adds another layer, and it tells you, it shows you what you're dealing with on this album.
And talking of adding another layer, I can, you know, you said you find it hard to articulate, Larry, why you love this album so much, but for me, there's another layer to it. In that it came out at a very, very special time in my life. I was kind of. It was around that time, you know, we were going to parties, we were getting our first jobs, you know, it was it was a really, really great time. And I just remember being in these house parties where, you know, we would put this on in the middle of the night and it would come in res. And that would just kind of, and then it would come in with that Ahmad Jamal sample, the dolphin dancing.
Yeah.
It has this really nostalgic, warm, soulful feeling for me, this album. Every time I listen to it, it takes me back there to that time. And I guess that's how a lot of music works. And there was a lot of other albums that came out in '94 that don't do that for me, but I think it was the combination of the type of music that was on this, combined with the sort of memorable lyricism that he brought to it, combined with the time of life I heard it. So it adds up to this big package that just...
I think there's definitely something to be... Like, Steve, if you kind of were more... If you had got into this a long time ago properly, where would it rank for you?
Well, it's interesting to say. I kind of just made a note here to kind of like, because to talk about in a moment, because this is an album that lots of people won't consider a great album or a classic album. So there's something about this album that makes it kind of not so accessible, because it is a cerebral album, and it's so fascinating to hear you two talk so passionately about it, and I definitely haven't had those insights that you two have. I don't know, maybe it's a maturity thing. I don't know what it is that hooked you two in at the time. Like you say, Danny, it was kind of, you were going through all those kind of teenage years, and I didn't get that album at that time. So I don't know. It'd be interesting, Larry. I think in a year's time, after I've listened to this more, or maybe, I don't know, come to love it a bit more. Ask me again.
Yeah, sometimes you just can't go back. Like, there are albums that I've listened to for this podcast for the first time that I recognize how incredible they are, but you can't attach that feeling that you had to it initially. And I think, like, this album, like, I loved hip hop already. This just elevated the art form for me and demonstrated to me what it could be. And I think from that point, I was like, this is the album against which everything else was judged. And why would I listen to something frivolous when I could just listen to this? It's like everything after this had to kind of be aiming for this.
It was
standard.
It was a new benchmark. Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of music. I think we've spent a lot of time on that album. I think we need to talk about its competitor now, because it's got a hell of a lot to live up to Cow by Method Man.
Can I go first on this one?
Yeah.
The reason is that I bought this album, Danny, on the back of you giving me a mixtape that had Release Yo Dale on it. Yeah. And when I heard it on that kind of mixtape, I can't even remember what other tracks on there. I think maybe Natural Born Killers was on there. It kind of like secured itself as like one of my favourite tracks ever. So I went out and bought the album, and I got back and I couldn't believe what I bought. I was like, oh my God, this is like impossible to listen to. I hate this. This is like ridiculous. And it was a time when I was like properly getting into hip hop, and it was like, and looking back, like putting it into kind of some kind of perspective now, I can't imagine having to listen to a more hardcore hip hop album. But having said all that, it was worth me persevering with it, because I think I owe this album a lot, because I think it taught me to appreciate harder hip hop and hip hop that's kind of, I don't know, a bit more kind of complicated, because I think this is a bit of a kind of genius of an album, and again it comes back to RZA, doesn't it? RZA is an absolute genius to be able to match these like crazy sparse beats to Method Man. There's probably not many rappers like Method Man that could have kind of pulled this album off, because I do love this album now, and Method Man is unusual. His voice is unusual. His flow is quite unusual. He's got that like undulating, pulsing, I don't know, rapping, and he does lots of random stuff, a bit like ODB, but maybe a bit more kind of coherent than him.
Yeah. He's very unique.
He is really unique, isn't he?
And he keeps you on your toes.
He was never able to do a good album after this one. I think the stuff he did subsequently was never kind of as good, because I don't think the beats were hard enough for his kind of like rhyme. So I just wanted to kind of say I kind of feel probably a bit more like you two, that I've got such a personal attachment to this one. It's kind of cemented itself in my kind of subconscious because of how much effort I had to put into like getting to know it and getting to love it. And
I think I was probably the same, actually.
When I go back and listen to it now, and I realise how many classics, and like Bring the Pain, that is like just such a head nodder. The beats are so fast, but you're just nodding along, and like all I Need, which I can't remember who the R&B singer is that did the remix on. I'm not interested in that one, but the lyrics in there are just superb, absolutely brilliant. And then What the Blood Clot, that is just like proper hardcore hip hop. It's just like mad, really. There's just lots of raw stuff. Sub Crazy, just really raw. And
raw is one word for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really raw. And I know, Danny, I don't think this is palatable to kind of your ear, but I also think this has aged really well. I don't know what you think about this album, Larry, but I don't skip anything on this album. I really enjoy listening to it. I think it's a timeless album with most of the album is RZA. I think there's like Ninth Disciple did a couple of tracks on there, but with a genius producer, a unique rapper, I think it's a fantastic album.
So, Larry, you go next, because I know you're a fan of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what it comes down to, I just love how kind of off kilter and weird the beats are.
Yeah.
This is probably responsible for me going down that path of liking kind of more abstract, hard to kind of process weird samples. It's kind of got more in common with trip hop than hip hop, really.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, I'm not quite sure of the timeline. I know sort of like, the first Portishead album was in 94. I don't know who was kind of influencing who, but to me it's kind of sounds like it could have been made in Bristol, basically, rather than New York. Some of it's a weird mix, but like the ones that I really like are tracks like Takal, Sub Crazy, PLO Style, Mr. Sandman. They're just all weird. Like I can understand why people would really dislike them, but it's that kind of thing that it gives me a weird, perverse kind of pleasure that I love these tracks, and other people would just like be really scratching their heads at why they can even be listened to at all. Like on some of those tracks, like the drums are barely there, like they're just buried under kind of low pass filters, and like in the case of Sub Crazy, there's not even a kick drum on there,
or a snare, really. It's
like a pitched down kind of hand clap that's buried in loads of reverb and delay, and that kind of thing, that kind of sound design, just really appeals to my kind of aesthetic preferences, really. I think it's kind of the precursor to me kind of getting into stuff like Company Flow and LP and all that kind of weird stuff, and it just goes, I don't think it would work with any other rapper. I think Method Man is just perfect for this, and like you say, Steve, like, and as we said before, RZA, like whether you like all of the individual albums or not, and I don't like them all especially, but he is the master of producing an album for an artist. Like all of the albums that he produced for Method Man, for ODB, for GZA, they match those rappers just absolutely perfectly. And this
it must have been a conscious decision. He must have consciously been thinking about that, because it can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's a producer in the proper sense of the word. He doesn't just like someone like Premier, as great as he is.
just have hundreds of beats.
I don't think he makes a beat thinking, "Oh, this will sound good for a J-Root beat, or this will be good for a group home beat." It's just he makes beats, and people say, "Oh, I'll have that one." Whereas RZA really just knows.
I don't know. I think you could have any of the Wu-Tangers over any of these.
Really?
No chance. Method Man is so. You might get away with ODB on some of these, but he's might be a bit
apart from ODB, Method Man is the kind of weirdest, kind of stoned. It's just it sounds smoky. Yeah. Like his whole thing was, Takal is weed, isn't it? He's all about smoking weed. It's like you can hear like the beats sound fuzzy, haze. You can hear the smoke. In the room, basically. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, no, I totally get, because I know that's your kind of preference, in terms of the stuff you like to listen to and the stuff you like to make.
Just mangling,
totally hear it.
He mangles
not
the
predictable.
samples, and
not predictable.
You don't know where the samples end and the kind of effects and the keyboards start. It just all kind of it's gloopy and mashed together, and I just love it. So
it's a bit of a mystery.
It's really dense. Yeah, it's a mystery. It's intriguing.
I get that, and I get that you love that sort of approach to beat.
But I can definitely see how it's completely antithetical to what you like, Danny.
It's absolutely. It's completely the opposite of what the sort of stuff I like. And there are moments on this album that I do love. Obviously, Steve, you mentioned like Bring the Pain earlier on and Release Your Delph. The two tracks I absolutely adore on this album, but that's because they're more.
They're a bit more traditional.
They're a bit more traditional, more mainstream. They're the ones that. For that reason, they were singles,
But even then, they're still very like Release Your Delph. That's a really harsh. That sample, it's like a wailing, weird horn.
Yeah.
Well, it's a trumpet, isn't it? And it's got
it's
a really
still quite
weird,
an aggressive track, isn't it?
It's quite aggressive. It's got this really weird sort of interpolation of "I Will Survive," like the lyrics.
Probably
so Blue
odd,
Raspberry again.
Yeah.
But so I like those two, and that shouldn't work putting those vocals on that track, but it kind of does.
The drum beat on that is quite like it's got that little military
it's military,
like a marching drum.
March.
I don't think I'm mistaken here. I think that was the first track Westwood ever played on his Radio 1 show.
That sounds about right. I remember listening to that again around some of those house parties and stuff, and I absolutely loved it. I played it all the time. So those two I love, but the rest of them I just. It feels like a party I haven't been invited to. It's like well, the first two words on my notes are absolute shite. Well, I think that's a bit harsh.
That is harsh.
I think that's harsh, but I think it's a very muddy, very messy, a sloppy album, but deliberately so, because that's what RZA's want. That's what he produced for Method Man, because that's the sort of artist he is. I get all that, but I just don't find that a very enjoyable listen. And I can't get on board with it. I
completely get that. I completely get why people wouldn't like this.
And even to the point where I understand what they're doing. I get it. I know what they're doing. I know that he's experimenting. I know he's creating this soundscape that suits Method Man's rapping style. And I get that.
But you just don't like it.
I just don't like it, basically, And I think we were talking about Sub Crazy a minute ago. For me, that is like one of the worst hip-hop beats of all time. And I know he probably... it was made in that way. It was made to be not a traditional hip hop beat, and I know for all those reasons it was an experiment. It was, he's trying to be different, and I get that, and I appreciate that, and I know you like that, Larry. But I can't. That track is unlistenable to me.
Unlistenable.
Fascinating though it is, to try and pick out some of the samples and that little rolling drum fill that he puts in there, and it kind of matches the rapping as well. That little fill as well.
On Cal.
On Sub Crazy.
Oh, okay.
That bit.
Yeah.
He kind of puts.
I love the little.
But it comes in and out. It comes in and out, and it doesn't stay the whole time.
I love the drums on Cal. It's got that kind of.
And then you've got some some of the more traditional sounding kind of Wu-Tang stuff, like What the Blood Clot and what's the other one? I'll Get My Thang in Action, PLO style.
They're very kind of
They're kind of classic Wu-Tang. I kind of get on board with some of those. But then Mr. Sandman's a very hard listen.
So Danny,
I love Mr. Sandman's got that to me is RZA distilled on that track.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous nonsense, basically, but brilliant.
Danny, I was going to say that you say it's unlistenable, and I think I thought that when I first bought it, and I kind of trained myself or persevered with it. Do you think if you listen to it like every day for the next like 2 months, you would ever come to appreciate it?
Probably not. Probably not. I need to have that instant connection with something. Not instant connection, but like it needs to at least give me something from the start that I can then work with. But I just don't.
I think it's such a different sound, isn't it? It's like if you were to say I'm not into heavy metal, that would just be instantly like, oh, I guess, fine, it's just not for you, kind of thing. And it's like that with this. It's just such a different
And I've been trying for nigh on 30 years. I put it on every now and again just to see. It just, I can't listen to it. I think it's my least favorite Wu-Tang album. But there we go.
One thing I think probably one thing that I've always kind of thought odd about this. All I Need, I think, is probably the worst track on there. But I love the Razor Sharp remix. And Danny, I think you like that one.
Yeah, I like that
well.
one. I prefer it anyway. I listened to it when I revisited it, and the version on the album is very has kind of amateurish quality to it.
Yeah,
with
very
the
sloppy.
descending like line. It's again that's Rez's thing, but I just it's not. I prefer the remix. But anyway, look, I think we need to move on because we've got another semi-final to get into. So we got to vote. We got to vote, chaps. I'm going to come to you first, Steve. I think I probably know the answer to this, but let's start with you.
No, leave me to last because I think I need some thinking time here.
All right. Well, let's get me out of the way because I think it's very clear what I'm going to vote
obvious,
for.
Yeah.
Because Resurrection is my, I'd say, second favorite hip hop album of all time. So I'm going Resurrection. Easy for me. Larry, what are you going for?
I love Tikal, but I would cast it into a ditch and never listen to it again quite happily if it meant that I could still have Resurrection in my life.
Lovely stuff. So that's kind of sorted it. So is it going to be a 3-0 whitewash or is it going to be a narrow 2-1?
I don't know. I mean, interesting because they're obviously like this word's like overused. They're both like seminal albums based on what we've been saying. They're both. But so many rappers and groups can look back and think, I followed Tikal or I followed Resurrection. Don't know. Can I abstain?
you could now because it's a moot point.
It is. I think I probably like.
But your fans out there, they want to know what you think, Steve. They want to know what you voted for.
So before this week, I would have said Tikal, definitely. And I think just hearing the discussion and listening to Resurrection and trying to appreciate it, I think I could vote for Resurrection. Sod it. I'm gonna go for Tikal. I think based on all the flack I've given Resurrection over the years.
Yeah. And sort of the formative nature of Tikal in your hip hop appreciation, I think it would be only right for you to vote for it.
Yeah, and I'm the same as Larry. I listen to more albums like Tikal now, or subsequently, than I do like Resurrection.
Fair enough.
So sorry,
okay.
Colin.
No, that's fair enough. So that's a 2-1 win for Resurrection. Resurrection goes through to the Hip Hop World Cup final.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
World Cup.
In your sound. Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
World Cup.
In your sound.
And now we're moving on to the second semi-final. This is a curious pairing for our second semi-final between Paris's Gorilla Funk and Illmatic by Nas, which on paper seems like a foregone conclusion, but let's see where we go with it. All right, Larry, do you want to start on this one?
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, Gorilla Funk, like Common, is another one where I'm just kind of a bit astonished that it's not revered by most people in the way it is by us.
Yeah.
I was looking at, there's this website, Hip Hop Golden Age. I was just curious as to where they placed Gorilla Funk and Resurrection, actually. Resurrection came in at 102 out of 250, which I just think is completely fucking bizarre. for proper, they're obviously proper hip hop fans. I don't get that at all. Gorilla Funk, not even in the top 250.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
They mention two of his other albums, like one gets in very high up, very low down, and the other one gets an honorable mention, but there's no Gorilla Funk, and I just don't get that. So I'm going to try and restore the kind of balance here a bit and really advocate for this album. Why do I love it so much? I think, the production makes up a very big part of it. It just sounds so like full and heavy and fat. And I think like the whole conceit of this album, I think, is that he was like borrowing the sound of G-Funk to reel people in. And then once he's got you, he kind of hits you with the kind of Black Power,
the messages,
like 5%er message, basically.
Can I just say before you move on, that's exactly one of my notes that I've said. He's appropriated the style to bring his messages to a wider audience.
Yeah, but he hasn't just done that. He's done it, and he has beaten almost everybody at their own game. Like he even just like he calls himself like on this album like the anti-gangster, and I don't think. I'm not saying he's better than someone like Dre or Quick, but I also find it difficult to say that they are better than him on this, because this album is just such a fantastically produced record.
Yeah, another one notes. It's only the best G-Funk album that Dr. Dre never made.
Never produced, absolutely. Like it kind of,
Great.
And he doesn't. There are a couple tracks on here that sound quite similar. So like you've got like the Prelude and It's Real and Gorilla Funk are all quite similar.
Yeah.
And I always kind of think in my mind, they all sound a bit like that, but actually they don't. There is a fair amount of variety like on display here. You've got really soulful stuff like, Out of My Life, which I absolutely love.
Uses the same sample as another 94 album.
Same sample as Life's a Bitch by
Your
Nas.
Love by Gap Band.
I just have to say that's the only track on the album I think doesn't quite work. I don't know.
It maybe doesn't quite fit as much as the rest. It's a bit of an outlier maybe in terms of like the style, but
I think his rapping doesn't quite flow on that because it's quite slowed down. It's not quite as funky.
He's definitely more suited to that high tempo, angry Ice Cube like delivery.
Yeah.
But that Out of My Life, I do love the fact that he uses that same sample as Nas. It also has a saxophone bit in it, like the Nas track does. Yeah. The Nas track was released 6 months earlier. Is it a homage or what? What's he doing? What's he doing there? It can't be a coincidence.
Well, the way I thought about it was, I think that's sax samples from the original track.
Oh, is it? Right,
I think so. But I know on Life's a Bitch that's Nas's dad.
Nas's dad, yeah.
But I don't know whether he's playing the sax from Yearning for Your Love.
Right, okay, yeah.
I'd need to look into that, but yeah.
That track that it samples over the Gap Band, I'd never heard that before for some reason until today, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
Brilliant, isn't it? Yeah.
Beautiful. But aside from the sound on this, like the lyrical content is just great. Like again, the whole thing is that he is so. The whole conceit of the album that he is contemptuous of gangster rap on this album, and you can really feel that. Like he feels that the promotion and emulation of that lifestyle is really damaging, and he goes after some people you consider to be sort of sacred cows, really. He doesn't sort of go so far as to name check people, but you've got tracks like 40 Ounces in a Fool where he is very pointedly going after Snoop Dogg on that track.
Do you think he's taking the piss out of Dre? And because they're often called studio gangsters.
Definitely.
He's taking the piss out of them. He's doing it really blatantly by taking their sound as well.
He's stolen their sound. He's throwing it back in their face.
Yeah.
Doing it as well as they can, effortlessly. Like the sound quality on it is like astonishing as well. It sounds better than any of the kind of Death Row records, I think, somehow. Yeah. Just engineered so nicely. But like 40 Ounces in a Fool, he mocks. Like for anyone that doesn't know, it's based on like back in this era, rappers used to do like TV commercials in the States for various like alcoholic drink brands. Like St. Ides was one of the main ones that like Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube and Dre would do kind of little adverts for, and it's a parody of one of those songs, and it's pitch perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, no,
he takes Snoop Dogg's flow and just mocks him with it, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. He's taken it and run with it, and he's used it to take the piss, but also to bring that G-funk audience in as well.
Yeah, you can listen to it just completely straight.
Yeah,
without really reading into any of the kind of messages. It's still a brilliant listen.
Yeah, it is a brilliant. But he's very engaging. He's got a lot of stuff to say. He's got more bees in his bonnet than a beekeeper.
Yeah.
You know, he's like. Sorry, but he has, isn't it? He's got loads of issues he wants to discuss, loads of things he wants to talk about, but he does it in this really mainstream, listenable, palatable package.
Yeah.
For instance, like It's Real and Gorilla Funk, the title track, very up tempo, very G-funky, very, listenable. But he's rap. Yeah, it's a really effective way of getting a point across, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you get lost in this album, can't you? Really nicely. You can just switch off and just get really engaged in what he's saying. And
he's a teacher, isn't he?
He's a teacher.
I don't want to kind of try and put myself in the position of like, a Black American youth in the mid-90s, but it's like he's your dad. Like he's a really good dad, like explaining why, son, you don't want to listen to this stuff. Listen to Chuck D rather than Snoop Dogg.
Educate yourself.
He will teach you something. Snoop Dogg will lead you in the wrong direction, and I love that. I think he's on that level of like a Chuck D, an Ice Cube, a KRS-One, like rappers who sound like they have complete authority and they just don't allow you to not listen.
Absolutely,
to what they're saying.
It's so interesting.
He's dropping knowledge.
But he's never got that level of respect, and it's really strange.
No, he hasn't, and neither is this album.
No, it's weird, isn't it? I mean,
even I personally, despite loving this album so much, I have never thought to seek out his other stuff for some reason.
That's weird. But yeah, I mean, maybe he doesn't do himself any favors with the whole, Bush Killer thing, and I looked at the inlay, the liner notes for the album and the CD, and he's advocating, well, if we're going to be shooting each other, why don't we go out and kill cops? Why don't we waste time shooting each other? Why don't we? And he's got like pictures in the inlay card of like cop cars with blood coming out of them and people going into the back of a black van, and I think he's a militant. He's the title says it all, Gorilla Funk. He wants to. By any means necessary.
Bearing in mind we're recording this on 9/11, like in about 2002, he had an album out called Sonic Jihad, which depicted, I think from memory, like a plane flying into like the Pentagon or something like that, or into some. It was a 9/11 parody on the front cover.
He's controversial. He pushes the buttons, doesn't he, of America? But I don't think he's got a big enough audience for it to kind of make much of a difference. I think that's probably one of his problems, is that he's got his own label and puts his albums out. I just don't think he made the impact that he probably should have done.
Yeah,
I don't know. In the same way that Chuck D did or whatever. But yeah. But should we just talk about some of the tracks on this album as well? Because it's such a great album. I mean, so it comes in Prelude, but it comes in with It's Real. It's got one of those buzzy bass lines, G-funk, really fat. Those kind of Parliament type thing. Big, like clappy drums and stuff like that, really up tempo. You could put that on a party, and
I think he does really he does choruses really well on this album. There's just something about this album where you just.
That's the thing.
It's all very catchy,
but also he's brought in like female vocalists for the hooks and stuff to sing. It's like there are gangster rappers and stuff. They don't go to those lengths. They don't bring in people to sing on the choruses and stuff.
It works really well.
It does work really well. It's catchy, and he's gone above and beyond to make a really good, solid album. And maybe he felt he needed to in order to get his message across.
He was competing with a lot of like very good music at this point, like people that were kind of into that G-funk sound. Like he had a lot to kind of go up against.
Exactly, and he had to make it good.
I think the title track is one of the funkiest tracks in hip hop.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It sounds a bit like another one, the one De La Soul sample. It's
that bass line. It's like Dre's had that bass line a load of times, and exactly. it's the kind of knee deep bass line, isn't it?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. And like a track like One Time for Your Mind, like that's fantastic. And it uses the beat, the rim shot beat that it uses. That's a classic G-Funk sample. It's used on Always Into Something, Same Old Shit by MC Ren. It's a proper G-Funk beat. But for some reason, that rim shot snare thing sounds so crisp. It really snaps. And it's just one of the many sonic kind of things about this album. I just really appreciate every time I listen to it, how hard and crisp that beat is.
Yeah. I think that track makes me kind of go into a trance. There's something
Yeah.
about the way it's produced. It's
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah,
Sinister,
definitely.
dark, and then a couple more. You go on to like Bring It To You with the Conscious Daughters on it, and
I
it's
love
got that high pitched wailing synth line that's very evocative of the G-funk sound, and that
Yeah.
is one of the most evil G-funk
Yeah.
synth lines I've ever heard in my life. I used to love it when that came out.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So good, so good. And then and the rest of What You See, kind of a bit more down tempo. I think that's why they put it after Out of My Life, because it's kind of like the slower bit in the middle. And then you got Back in the Days, which is kind of like, it almost sounds like part 2 of Paris's kind of nostalgia.
Yeah,
because he did Days of Old on Sleeping with the Enemy.
Yeah.
He's done this one on Back in the
Great
Days.
track.
Obviously, it's like part 2. It's kind of got a kind of more of a reggae flavour to it, which it's good. You wouldn't skip it, but it's perhaps one of the weaker ones. But then you got 2 versions of Gorilla Funk and It's Real, like extended mixes of it. It's just but the thing is, there's only with if you take those remixes out and the skits out, there's only like 10 tracks on it.
Yeah,
So it's really short,
it's very focused.
really focused. Yeah, it's a really focused short listen, and I think that
It's actually 8 tracks.
Like
It's-
Eight,
it's
yeah.
eight. Probably there's the prelude and then 8 tracks.
Yeah. I think, and that always counts in an album's favour for me. I don't know.
Yeah,
yeah, I agree. It doesn't need to be drawn out.
No. So
yeah. You can easily imagine a version of this that's 12 tracks long and it's got 4 tracks of filler on it.
exactly, and that's not what he went for. So I think all in all, a really, really solid, really, really good album that doesn't get the props it should. Really, why isn't it celebrated more? I don't know, but we're certainly celebrating it here. But it is up against perhaps what is considered to be the greatest hip hop album of all time, in Illmatic by Nas. Where do we even begin to start talking about this one, lads? I mean, Steve, I'm going to start with you because I know you're a massive fan of this. What are your thoughts on Illmatic, and how does it compare to Gorilla Funk?
Well, we were messaging each other today, weren't we? And I think Larry's going to sum this up. There's probably not a lot we can say about this, and I think the only thing I can do is probably wax lyrical, because in my opinion, this is hip hop perfection. The production and the rapping. This was obviously a hyped album before it came out, and I think we alluded to this earlier. Is for me one of the intricacies of this album is how the production, it kind of like varies quite nicely from track to track. This is not a samey album. The production that he's got on here is from the best producers in the game, and I think it's coherent enough but varied enough to be an interesting long player. There's nothing on here that you want to skip. I don't know which track you were going to say earlier, Larry, is the one that kind of lets it down. I think the weakest track is One Time For Your Mind. That's the one that I think just doesn't.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
I think that's accepted wisdom.
Yeah.
Well, I see. I didn't know you were thinking that, but I think probably all of the tracks are 5-star tracks, and that there are lots of 5-star tracks on there for me. It's just incredible, but it still has a coherence. The album still has a coherence. I think maybe that's because Nas is such an incredible rapper. His skills are just ridiculous. He's just so poetic, so metaphoric, clever wordplay. He can just rhyme. He's just an amazing rhymer. So I think all those things are known. There's no kind of insights there, but it's just magic. When I play this album, it is a masterpiece. It is one of the best of any genre, one of the best albums ever. And for me, it is the best hip hop album ever. It's not necessarily my favorite album ever, but I think it's the best.
Interesting.
Danny, why don't you go?
All right. So, I do love this album. I know you both think I'm going to say I don't love this album, and
that's my impression, that you just don't really like it.
No, that's not absolutely not the case. I was on board with this album from day one. I remember reading the review of it in The Source, the famous 5 mic review. I remember buying it instantly. I remember falling in absolute love with it. I think it is an absolute masterpiece. It's 10 tracks of hip hop perfection, honestly. And if you're looking at rap or hip hop in its technical form, there aren't many. There are very few bad tracks on here. One Time For Your Mind is probably the exception. It's the only one that I kind of ever really skip when I listen to this album. But I don't know. In latter years, I've started to think that it's maybe a little bit overrated. Just from having listened to it and being slightly bored by some of the tracks, like especially like things like New York State of Mind. Now that beat is very simple, very plain, very boring, and he's technically brilliant, and the lyrics are great over the top of it. But I do find that track kind of drags a bit.
But Nas's lyrical skill on that track is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's great, but
it's hip hop quotable. Is
there an element of like over familiarity?
There is
breeding contempt on this, like because it is so good. You listen to it so much, it kind of starts to lose meaning.
Yeah, that is a part of the problem. But they was the case with Resurrection, for instance. Like I never stopped disliking that because I listened to it too much. I don't know.
You're spoilt on this album, though, aren't you?
You are.
You probably have to appreciate Resurrection a bit more. This one doesn't take any appreciation. This
is straight in there, and it's got all my favourite producers on it. You know, it's got Primo, it's got LES, it's got Pete Rock,
it's got
Large
Pete
Professor.
Rock.
Pete Rock, and The World Is Yours. Honestly, that's probably one of my favourite Pete Rock productions of all time. It's absolutely fantastic, and I love that. One Love is phenomenal. Not only the Q-Tip beat, I love that Smiling Billy Sweet sample, but also the lyrics and the concept of the track. Talking to from prison, fantastic.
It is amazing. I didn't realise Q-Tip produced that. It doesn't sound like a Q-Tip production.
I think the snares do. It's very reminiscent of his stuff.
Primo.
It's very reminiscent of his stuff on the Mobb Deep album as well.
It is amazing, amazing production.
Yeah, amazing production.
Q-Tip is a genius.
I'm really struggling here to explain why my view on this album is sort of slightly soured over the years. But I'm going to go back to my original 1994 self, and I'm going to sort of say, yes, I do love this album. It's really tight. I love the fact that it's short and all the tracks are really good. I do love it. I do love it, but I just I don't think I love it quite as much as you two.
Familiarity just breeds contempt, and
there's definitely an element of that for me. Like I don't listen to it particularly often.
Yeah, I agree.
But then I also don't listen to Resurrection very often either. And I think with Resurrection, I am just burnt out on it. I listened to it so hard for so many years that although there are still bits in it that I kind of discover when I listen to it again, I just don't. It's quite rare that I put it on, and I don't put Illmatic on all that often either.
Yeah,
I think if you just the very nature of anyone listening to this podcast, they're going to assume that this wins this year, and they probably would think that they would win like a cup. It would win like a Cup Winners' Cup of all the years we've done so far, and I don't think anyone would kind of really argue against that. I think as we said, it's so hard to say anything kind of memorable about this album because it's all been said before and everyone knows it so well. But I think the one thing that hadn't necessarily struck me before is how catchy everything is. Like there's lots of earworms on there, whether it's either the samples, like the loops and the samples they use, like, The World Is Yours, such a catchy little piano hook that he's got in there. Same as NY State of Mind. I know it's simple, but that piano is just sinister. It's just, it's New York, isn't it? That piano, that little piano roll. One Love has got that chorus in it. Memory Lane's got a brilliant chorus and that brilliant kind of like organ sample. Even like that chanted like Represent kind of chorus, if you call it that. Everything's catchy. Like it ain't hard to tell. It's got that really catchy like Michael Jackson sample.
Yeah,
so that's the thing I take from this album. Everything's just catchy on it. That's why it's kind of really sticks in people's memory, I think.
Can I just say about It Ain't Hard to Tell? That is my absolute favourite track on the album. But what I think works really well is obviously the Human Nature sample is fantastic on there, but it fades out really nicely, and then Nas kind of flows really, really well kind of afterwards. It kind of merges that sample and him so well, and he's so quotable.
I think that It Ain't Hard to Tell beat is awful.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's. I don't understand why that's held in such reverence. It's really bad.
I love that track.
It's very simple.
It's very simple. It takes a like Michael Jackson song, but conversely, the lyrics are phenomenal. Like, I don't know anyone, any hip hop fan who doesn't know all the lyrics to that, who can't rap along.
Vocabulary spills, I'm ill, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff. It's so rappable, you know, you want to go along with it. But I do think the music is overrated, and as a Large Professor fan and a Large Professor beat, I've always thought that was one of his weaker tracks, but it's it's one of his best known.
I do wonder
the remix though is I much prefer the remix of that track.
Yeah, I wonder. Like Nas has always had a bit of a reputation for poor beat selection, like post this album, which I think is kind of deserved, really. And on here, funnily enough, I was watching like DJ Premier has like a little series of videos on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen them, where he kind of talks about classic beats that he's done. I don't know if you've seen the one for Represent, but he talks about it was originally a different beat, and he played it, and it's nowhere near as good as the one that ended up on the album. But after hearing that track, he had heard, I don't know, like The World Is Yours or something like that, and had just thought, I need to do something that's as good as that, or I need to kind of step it up. So he redid the beat for Represent, and then he had to basically pester and beg Nas into having that version of it on there. And if he had the original version, like along with, It Ain't Hard to Tell and One Time For Your Mind, it might have ended up like those last three tracks could have been a little bit bit weak. And I wonder if, like, with It Ain't Hard to Tell, I wonder if he, like, because it's such an obvious sample to use, I'd like to know the story behind it, like who brought, like, maybe it was like, I want you to use this sample, maybe. Who knows?
It'd be interesting to know. But yeah, I was going to ask you both actually something else. You know, well, we always say that the best albums are often one producer, one singular vision of producing.
Yeah.
This is a kind of a hodgepodge of different producers, handpicked, and selected some of the best hip hop producers around.
They're all similar enough.
Yeah, but I was going to say,
you wouldn't put RZA on here or Dr. Dre. Would you?
But why is this the exception then? Is it because of that? Is it because they're all fairly sort of?
I think they're kind of You if you had told me that it was all the same producer, I wouldn't really disbelieve you. Like, if you're, for the connoisseur, you can tell a Primo beat from a Pete Rock beat, obviously, but they're not so different that you think, oh, hang on, that's jarring.
Yeah,
like it's a RZA beat or something like that.
Yeah, true.
But that's maybe why in future albums that Nas kind of falls down, because the production, like you say, I think of some of his albums are all a bit more samey, whereas there's enough difference on this album where there's, like, Pete Rock's a bit jazzier, Primo's some of his tracks are more sparse, some are a bit more soulful. Large Professor's definitely a bit more kind of soulful.
I think just coming back to the rapping on this, which is kind of, which is what Nas, he is famed as, like, an incredible rapper. I think he is, but I can't really tell you why the raps are so good. Like, I don't think he can beat Common in terms of, like, pure lyrical ability, either lyrically or in kind of, verbal dexterity. But somehow he manages to be better than, like, Common,
or considered better. I think it's because of the pictures he paints.
But I actually think he is probably, like, I think he is more listenable than Common. I think it's like he's got a great voice. It's just like his flow is just, like, buttery smooth, and I think it just comes down, like, he has this incredible ability to, like with Biggie, it's not particularly fussy. Like, he just places his syllables perfectly. Like, there's a musicality to it, and it was kind of like I was trying to think, like, it's almost like a jazz musician, like, playing an instrument and kind of knowing where not to put notes and where to put them. He's got this kind of ability to do that really well. That's the only kind of way I can describe it.
I think he's actually quite similar to Common because they're both quite poetic. They like their metaphors. They've got those punchlines, and I think they're very similar. But like you said, Larry, I think Nas is able just to deliver it. He just sounds better. He's just so
he's so natural. Even on his later albums, where the music isn't as good and stuff, he still sounds really fucking good.
Yeah.
Like even on his most recent albums, he still sounds brilliant. Even if
I think on this album, he uses up all his kind of good punchlines, all his best metaphors, and actually, how can you ever reproduce some of the amazing like quotable stuff that he has on here? It's just impossible.
Yeah, great voice, great rapper. But we've got some business to attend to now, gents. We need to decide who's going through to the World Cup final to face Common Sense. So, Larry,
I can go first. I go first.
All right, Steve. Yep, cool.
Mine's easy. Illmatic, best album.
Yeah, Larry.
Yeah. Mine is far from easy. Like I can't put a piece of paper between these two things. Do you want to know the Tru-Skore scores?
Briefly.
Gorilla Funk, 4.38.
Oh.
Yeah.
Illmatic, 4.52. So Illmatic does come out on top. And I don't know. I think I'm going to have to go with Illmatic. I love Gorilla Funk. It's so difficult. I would put tomorrow, I would put on Gorilla Funk before I put on Illmatic.
Yeah.
I do listen to Gorilla Funk more than I listen to Illmatic, but it's one of those ones it's such a big album. I can't quite bring myself to place Gorilla Funk over it. I think I do have to go for Illmatic.
Yeah.
Well done, Larry.
I'm exactly the same as you, Larry. I just don't think there's any universe I could put Gorilla Funk through over Illmatic.
I want to almost, but
I'm the same as you.
Are you going to vote for Illmatic, Danny?
Yeah, I just enjoy listening to Gorilla Funk so much more, but I realise I'm going to put myself back in the shoes of how I felt about Illmatic back in '94, and I just don't think there's a universe I can cannot put it through. I'm going to vote for Illmatic, which is a 3-0 win for Illmatic, which is probably as it should be. But I want to recognise that Gorilla Funk is a fantastic album.
I thought you were going to go for Gorilla Funk, Danny, and there was half of me that thought that I was going to go for it as well. But when you put them both on paper, you got them in front of you, you think, I can't do it.
We would be laughed out of Hip Hop Club, wouldn't we, if we put it through? And I know we're not basing it on that. That's not how we work here, but I do think that, I think my hesitation over Nas has been tainted in more recent years, but I think 1994 me would have just put this through no question. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do that. So that's.
I think I'll sleep easier tonight knowing that I've put Illmatic through.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that completes the lineup for the 1994 Hip Hop World Cup final. It is going to be Common Sense, Resurrection versus Nas, Illmatic. Join us after this where we're going to play it out. Okay, you join us back here, pitch side at the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena for the final of the Hip Hop World Cup 1994, our final episode in the series. Chaps, it's been emotional, it's been exciting, it's been argumentative at times. How are you both feeling about this? We're gonna be putting up Common Sense's Resurrection against Nas's Illmatic. Quick thoughts before we go into this final.
It's been great, hasn't it? I think it's been an episode that I've been looking forward to for such a long time, and I think we've probably had our best discussions, our best debates, and there's been some fantastic football or hip hop, whichever way you want to describe it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been emotional. Even the cake's in tears. I know it's a wedding.
It's a wedding. Right. So how are we going to do this? Okay. So we've got Common Sense, Resurrection versus Nas, Illmatic. For me, I don't know, how can I put Illmatic? How can Illmatic get my vote when I've said on record that Resurrection is my second favourite hip hop album of all time? For me, there's just a hell of a lot more going for it. I would put it on tomorrow over Illmatic every day of the week. The production is incredible. The lyricism, the wordplay is so clever. His lyrical dexterity, Common I'm talking about. For me, it's just the better all-round package. It's the one I would listen to more. But you know, on the flip side, Illmatic is a phenomenal album. So many good tracks, tight. Some of the best producers in hip-hop history doing some of their best work. And Nas is, as we've said, he's a phenomenal lyricist. He delivers it in such a great way. It's a really, really difficult kind of matchup, and I know you two are going to struggle to say which one's your favourite. But for me, I think in this final, I think it's going to have to be Resurrection. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Let me go next because there's no struggles for me here. You know, I am really pleased Resurrection has got to the final, particularly because you two like it so much. But Illmatic is a way superior album. It is. I think universally it'd be either the first or second album on most people's lists, and it's first on my list. I do agree with you, Danny. There'd be other albums that I would rather listen to tomorrow than Illmatic, but what I can't find fault with it. It is just a masterpiece.
But are you looking at Illmatic with your analytical, technical head on, and you just looking at it thinking, yeah, I should vote for that, much like kind of a couple of us did in the last round?
I do love it. I play it regularly. I do love it. I just have other albums like Resurrection that you love that I would put on before it, but I can't see any other album winning in this year. So and we've said, I think there's, we've said it already. I think it's down to you, Larry. You've got like the weight of the World Cup on your shoulders now.
Yeah, this is such a tough one. I think I'm just going to really quickly give you the Tru-Skore scores for all of these, because it's a sophisticated piece of kit. Murder Was the Case is a 3.5. Resurrection 4.16. Ready to Die 4.13. Gorilla Funk 4.38, Fear Itself 3, Tikal 3.59, Beatnuts 3.35, and Illmatic 4.52, which makes Illmatic the clear winner from the Tru-Skore perspective. But it also means that Gorilla Funk is rated higher than Resurrection by a fair margin as well. But we don't always go with the Tru-Skore scores. I think Illmatic is it's going to be most people's choice. And I could make a case for it being a better album than everything else on here. But the totality of how I feel about Resurrection means I have to vote for Resurrection. It's got tracks on there that even Illmatic can't touch, and there are some quite bad tracks on there as well, unfortunately, that brings the score down. But just as an overall piece of work, I think it's phenomenal, and I want to give it its due that it doesn't get anywhere else. So Resurrection gets the vote for me.
Love that.
Hang on. Wait. Tru-Skore, your invention that you've kind of patented and you're like going to get like thousands of pounds from, has decided Illmatic, and you've gone for Resurrection.
It's a guide.
It's a guide. It's a guide to help you decide how you feel about something. Like, Steve, you're a teacher. You've seen lots of pupils come through your school over the years. The kids that get the top marks, are they always the most genuinely intellectually engaging, charismatic people? You've basically chosen the teacher's pet, haven't you? That's you've chosen to kind of win. I've chosen the student who when they're a bit older, I'll have a chat with in the street. about interesting stuff and philosophy, rather than the one who gets A's in everything, goes to Oxford, but he's a boring bastard.
He's your mate,
Illmatic's
your
done its
friend.
homework every week, and it's come out top in all the tests, and you've just poo-pooed it. I think that's
This guy doesn't need to revise for exams. He doesn't need a certificate to tell him how clever he is or how well he's going to do in life.
I should have put £50 on Resurrection winning today. I tell you, I knew you two.
I mean, you have to understand, Steve.
The bookies are going to be going mental.
The bookies are going mental, but you have to understand that it has the weight of years behind it. Your Resurrection. Me and Larry loving this album, talking about this album. You know, it's just been one of our favourites for such a long time. And I know we've both loved Illmatic, but it's got that extra emotional attachment,
extra dimension
that an objective, scientific, empirical measuring system just cannot capture.
No,
and that's where
it's science versus philosophy.
Yeah, science versus philosophy.
There was just a little bit of me who was thinking, Larry, I've got a hope here. The Larry and Tru-Skore could come through.
Do you know what? I was when I saw the scores come out, I thought I have to go for Illmatic, and I made a case for myself for voting for Illmatic, and on another day I would have. Brain was firing slightly differently. I would go for it just because it's such an important seminal album.
But you've gone with your heart. You've gone with your heart.
I've gone with my heart.
And
this is a World Cup. This is a World Cup.
There are absolute scenes here. You can't see this obviously being an audio-only podcast, but Steve's got his head in his hands. Our 50 guests who we invited into the corporate box, they've somehow managed to escape. They're on the pitch. They're ripping up the advertising hoardings. Diana Ross is going absolutely ballistic. She's got a shirt over her head. She's running around goading some of our guests, which isn't a good look.
What is Gaza doing, Danny?
Absolute chaos. Well, they're still up in the box. They're still eating the canapes.
Gaz has got his plastic breasts on.
Honestly, the scenes here. The crowd literally cannot believe that Resurrection has beaten Illmatic in the 1994 World Cup. But that's your result. Extraordinary scenes. And I know one person who might have a few things to say about this is our special guest today. We're going to get him on the line now to talk about our winning album. Arguably the greatest football player of all time. He's a 3-time World Cup winner, Brazil's all-time top goal scorer, but he's probably best known for his work raising awareness of erectile dysfunction. It's the one and only Edson Arantes de Nascimento, better known as Pele. How are you doing, Pele?
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
So, Pele, you famously promoted Viagra in the noughties, and in hip-hop terms, there was certainly some stiff competition in 1994. But why do you think it was such a seminal year for hip-hop?
Listen,
Pele?
Viagra.
Oh, he's gone. Okay, it's another failed interview.
Not for erection.
I don't know what's going on with our satellite link. He's frozen, I think.
The money we sunk into this.
It's difficult to say.
Crazy.
No, you know.
No, he's gone. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry, lads. This has not been a successful series in terms of interviews.
But that one would have made up.
I've made promises our technology just have not been able to keep. I'm so
you want if we do another series, you want to get the guys at Tru-Skore onto the technical side of this because they are wizards.
Yeah, could they develop something?
I expect they could. I expect they could develop an app or something like or a machine.
Right, it's a deal.
Series kind of hybrid.
Series 2, we're getting the Tru-Skore guys involved. Right, it's a deal.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right, so listen. Do you agree with our winning album or disagree? A lot of controversy in this one. A shock result. I know Steve's shaking his head. He doesn't quite agree. But either way, hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at Hip Hop World Cup if you want to share your thoughts or just talk 90s hip hop in general. But for now, thank you for listening to all the episodes in this series. And we're ghosts like Patrick Swayze. Peace.
A battle to the death. Classic albums clash until there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, we slate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them is won. Then it's to the semis and the final for the final cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin.
Hello?
Viagra.